Hey everyone, today's tutorial is on osteoporosis, osteopenia, or thin bone. And interesting, you got some broken bones or broken trees back there. So regarding human presentation for thin bones, ultimately fracture, it's important to note that we deem that osteopenia and osteoporosis, usually the algorithms for taking care of patients that have higher risk for fracture, potential is high with people who have a certain thickness or thinness to their bones. So that's why the value of this thing called a DEXA scan is really important. A nice glorified x-ray that has a measure of sorts in their algorithm to determine thickness or thinness. You put that number that you have against the standard deviation of the population, and you see if you fit the category for high risk. So if you're osteoporotic, usually that's really high risk. There's something called a FRAX calculator that most radiology centers use, and there's a bottom line, 3% and greater than 10 to 20%. You have to stay below to avoid any potential for easy fracture. And I'm not talking about falling down, although that's important as you get older. Proprioception is lacking, and that's why I do challenged inclines or elevation changes, is because lifting your feet up and putting them down in a mindful way does get you to, number one, get more impact. Number two, develop resistance. This is a form of resistance exercise. And number three, your footing has to be sure. So there is a little bit of proprioceptive work with the ankles, the feet, the boots, your core, because I'm carrying weight. All this stuff is important. Those that have been given a diagnosis of thin bone usually know to start activity. Yeah. The biggest cause of thinning out your bones is being stagnant. When you walk, when I carry weight, this is a light backpack, but when I carry my weight vest or do impact work with regards to jumping, the idea is that that shock wave can be offset by the way my knees and my ankles work. Has a cushion, but it also sends a shock wave up the axial spine, feet, shins, thighs, hips, pelvis, lumbar spine, and forward. Now, if you have a backpack, it'll also call in the thoracic spine, a little bit of the cervical spine. So I think it's an easy treatment plan. So COVID has knocked a lot of us out as far as what we have options for. However, getting outside, no matter where you are in the world, is important. In Chicago, I have people that commit to walking, and most of Chicago is flat. Walking is a good entry-level activity for you osteopenic, osteoporotic folks. But if you look at, and I'll put some studies up later, if you look at the small studies that evaluated cardiovascular work, cycling, swimming, walking, jogging, to resistance work, ultimately it's a combination of two that gets people to reverse the osteopenia, osteoporosis. And I've had patients that have reversed their disease. Now, it's not just the activity, although that's a big factor, because if you take vitamin D, K2, take away phosphates from your sodas, decrease your alcohol, decrease your coffee, all that stuff, in addition to a hopefully plant-centered, well-balanced diet, will help you reverse. I probably should talk about why it happens, but without getting into the weeds, what happens is bone acts as structure, but bone also acts as a sink or a repository for minerals, calcium, magnesium, sometimes in some cases strontium. So all that stuff gets released. You need magnesium to run from danger, but it gets stored in the bone and gets released immediately during stress or fight or flight. So that's how bone works. But the way you put the minerals in, the way you take the minerals out, are done by two little, they look like scrubbing bubbles, but two little guys. One's an osteoblast. It puts down matrix, calcium, and all that other stuff. One's an osteoclast that tears up and pulls out mineral. So it's supposed to be osteoblast, puts down strong bone, matrix, and minerals depending on the amount of load stress that you apply. So a person that's running will have a lot of demand for more calcium deposits and thus stronger bones. A person that's punching the wall like in martial arts. They'll have more deposition of thicker bone to where the impact is felt. So those are kind of cursory, but that's how an osteoblast works. An osteoclast, if you need to remove bone, if you have taken the pressure away and there's no more sense that you need to have thick bone in certain areas, the osteoclast thins up the bone. So it also releases the magnesium really fast, and other products too. So that's the basics of the way osteoblasts and osteoclasts work. The problem is sometimes with inactivity, you get excessively thin boned. And if you get to a certain point, you will, if you fall down or if you just cough, sneeze. I had a nun that was on chronic steroids, and every winter she'd have an asthma flare-up. That was the reason for the chronic steroids, and I felt so sorry because every winter she'd sneeze, cough because of the asthma, and she'd break another rib or a backbone, and it was just a terrible way to go. So you would think that the blasts that build and the clasts that take down and take apart would be easily balanced, but age, disease, immobility, that stuff, all those variables change in some people in addition to maybe genetics, and it sets up for osteoporosis, osteopenia. I'm on the downside of the Swallow Cliff stairs, but with COVID, a lot of people had to stay out of the gyms or had to stay at home because that's where their work was, and everybody became immobile and gained like 5 to 10 pounds. Except for this place. This place was even open during COVID, and you see people that go from the base at the parking lot, go up, that's the upside, go around the concession stand and down this side. So this is an easy way to get activity during any type of weather. I think you're supposed to wear masks, but I just came off of the wood trail, and I think you're distanced socially, but you can get a good workout. So anybody should be active. If you're starting out by just doing walking routine in the neighborhood, cool. You have to always advance though, and again, the data, which I'll show you later, says that you should be doing some bit of cardiovascular or anti-gravity exercise in addition to resistance training. That is, in small studies, fared to be the best combination of activities to reverse osteoporosis. I think a lot of data says stop osteoporosis. I've seen my patients reverse it. Now that's in addition to a couple other changes, but it's important to understand what are the biggest impact changes that you can apply to your lifestyle that got you to this point that will hopefully stop or reverse. And again, activity is going to be the first thing. Food and nutrition will be the second. Taking care of your disease process, whatever that might be, whether it's diabetes, high blood pressure, cholesterol, obesity, all that's important too. So you guys take care of your activities as best as you can and always progress forward. Don't just be stuck at a 30-minute walk 3 times a week. Try to do more advancement and set a time period on the calendar for when you expect an advance. I always like to see with resistance or cardiovascular, I think there's, whether it's a PR or a max lift, I think it's important to be able to have a mark and then beat the mark. That's a sign that you're improving with your strength and your cardiovascular fitness. That's a sign that your activities are decent enough because of this fact, which is the rant part. You know, when you get diagnosed with osteoporosis, osteopenia, it's called a DEXA scan. And insurance pays for a DEXA scan after you reach a certain age because of the increased chances of high risk with certain ages. Or if you have disease, because as I mentioned, long use of steroids is important to halt disease, or immunosuppressants like with psoriatic arthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, Crohn's disease, lupus. All those are necessary evils to take on the complex medicines. But those same complex medicines that increase your survival also increase your chances for osteoporosis and fracture. If you haven't heard the statistics, once you get your first fracture and get hospitalized, whether it's for a back fracture that you're in rehab for or a hip fracture where you need another hip, there's a high chance from that point forward to have another crack and or to have another disease process because you're even more immobile. So I think we should try to beat that. The problem is you only get a DEXA scan every 2 years. So if you have a diagnosis, doc would say, increase your calcium, work on vitamin D, lose some weight and exercise. I'll see you in 2 years. And that's really what doctors do. Unless you've hit the threshold for a label of severe osteoporosis, then they'll give you all the suggestions in addition to putting you on medicines. I like old school nasal spray. It's salmon hormone, calcitonin. I think it works, or if you have excessive sensitivity to the nares, the nose lining, or if you have issues with your nose, swelling, rhinitis, allergies, you might not like it. I think there's less side effects to that than the newer medicines, Moniva, Fosamax, Actonel. All those things are really cool. Technically, it reverses your DEXA scan. But you also have other areas that fracture. If you haven't heard, alveolar bone, which is jawbone, is easy to fracture when you're on those medicines. That's why dentists really are apprehensive about doing any work on root canals or posts when you're on the medicines, because the likelihood is you're going to break easier. It sounds kind of weird that you'll have a medicine that will reverse thin bone to hip and lumbar spine, but it'll cause fractures to occur in other places. This is essentially a view of the oval track for hikers or people that run that want resistance training. It goes up one side, goes around where the toboggan shed used to be, and goes down the other side. And there's enough parking where you can fit a lot of people, and then there's offshoots where you can actually go into the woods. So once you've been diagnosed with osteopenia or osteoporosis, you have 2 years to work on your own to change around a couple of things. And that would be nutrition, activity, sleep quality, and exercise. Also weight. Unfortunately, one of the risk factors for osteoporosis, osteopenia, is light body weight. Believe it or not, a low BMI is also dangerous. I've always talked about high BMI being related to blood pressure, stroke, cancer, and diabetes. Well, low BMI increases your chances for a fracture or osteoporosis, osteopenia. But my gripe is that if you're given 2 years to do it on your own and you embrace something of a nutrition plan or an activity, and you get back at the 2-year mark to have your second DEXA scan and you fail because it's gotten worse, that's 2 years of wasted time. And a lot of my patients don't know what to do with regards to impact exercise, the proper exercise, how to put on muscle mass, which I really think decreases your chances for osteoporosis and osteopenia. I have patients that are ex-athletes from high school and college, and they still don't know what to do to manipulate exercise activity to take care of their medical disease. So it really needs an initial consult to evaluate everything about the patient, not just the DEXA scan and nutrition. And then it needs formulation of a plan that you try. Then after applying the plan, if it doesn't stick, you have to reformulate that. But you don't wait every 2 years to reformulate it. What I do with my patients, if it's just osteoporosis and nothing else, I'll give them a trajectory of what they're supposed to do. I'll let them apply that for about 6 months, and then I'll see how the metrics have changed, whether it's blood test, weight. If they have maintained their lifestyle plan that I designed for them in 6 months, then I'll repeat some metrics. As I said before, it's really hard to get the insurance company to pay for a DEXA scan, except for every 2 years. There are other labs you can do to see if your efforts have resulted in change. I'll put a list of my favorite blood tests down below, in addition to fine-tuning your level of vitamin D, K2 if you're taking it, inflammatory markers. But the average American diet is so devoid of many other things that you got a lot of work to do if you're just going to do calcium. Get all those other products of fast food out of your life. And yeah, I don't think alcohol helps. I think there's some data that says up to 2 glasses for some men and 1 glass for some women a day will help, but not if it screws up the stomach lining and decreases absorption of vitamins that are necessary to beat or reverse disease. So keep your alcohol to the weekend. Push hard even if you are retired during the 5-day week, and don't just wait for the DEXA scan every 2 years. Get to somebody that's efficient with coaching, that can design an exercise program for you, change around your nutrition, help you with sleep. All those things that I mentioned, in addition to the readjustments every 3 to 6 months, is important to fine-tune you so that when you do go for the repeat DEXA scan at the 2-year mark, doc doesn't give you bad news and say, well, you're worse now, so you do need some medicines. I think there's always opportunities to beat medicines. Don't feel that you're alone. If your doctor isn't helping you or giving your guidance, or you don't have a coach around you, you can always consult me on my Herbal 411 website, and I'll put a link down below. Then I can figure out your strengths, weaknesses, resources, your age, limitations, and put together a personal program so you don't have to get on another medicine. Finally, if you live in a flat area like Chicago, get out to these mountains every once in a while. It's not really a mountain, but it's the best we got. You can also do stairs if you have a big building. I'll leave you with this. It's important to have an exercise routine that's fine-tuned for you, but if you can't find anybody, you don't want to see me, at least get out and do some resistance exercise once a week, and include with your walking routine jumping jacks and jump rope. I think that's a little bit of an entry-level impact exercise. You don't have to really learn too much. Everybody knows what jumping jacks are, I hope. And jump roping, it takes a little bit of coordination, but you can do it anywhere. Hopefully this gives you a couple of ideas. If you have any comments about how you've beat your disease, whether it's a vibration plate, a nutraceutical, or some form of impact exercise, put it in the comments down below. Thanks for watching. I'll see you at the next video. this is going to be a bonus video for those of you who like to get into the weeds. So with regards to strontium, this is one of the studies that came out of France. And this is pretty good because it gives you a mechanistic idea about how strontium, when you take it as a supplement, helps replace calcium as far as the bone matrix. Think of it this way. Those of you who know that too much fluoride is a bad thing, well, fluoride, if it gets into your water supply or your food supply, takes the place of calcium, and calcium is a building block for the bone matrix. Going down to the electron microscope level, when you look at your bone matrix or your structure, it's essentially made up of minerals and glue. And one of those minerals is calcium. When fluoride is mistakenly picked up by the osteoblasts that put down matrix that make the glue, it makes terrible glue, meaning that those bones with people who have a lot of fluoride break easy. Now, along those same lines, when you have low levels of strontium, you also will open up the potential for bad matrix laying and weak bone. When you supply the strontium back to physiologic levels, it will actually take the place of the calcium and make bone stronger. So in the second study, they studied the effects of strontium on bone, and they found within 6 months of supplement, they actually made it stronger than before. The scientists were able to actually measure how much strontium was put into the new bone matrix, and it was definitely increased compared to old bone, but still you have a stronger bone than before. The question is, as you're older, do we get low on strontium, thus the increased potential for fracture? Or will strontium come in as a rescue molecule to strengthen bone that is already thought of as being thin or osteoporotic? There is not enough data to strengthen one opinion versus the others, but for sure strontium has a low level of side effects. And with osteoporosis, osteopenia, we've found that studies have shown improvement in overall bone rigidity. Those two studies were out of France, but there's also other studies that have shown using strontium increases in addition to other micronutrients. This paper talks about the MOTS study, MOTS, that's the melatonin / micronutrient osteopenic treatment study. Here they used melatonin, strontium, vitamin D, and K2. And again, they had improvement in overall bone thickness before that window of 2 years. The other thing that's good with this study is that the first two studies out of France dealt with strontium ranulate. And this study, MOTS study, dealt with strontium citrate, which is more easily available even on Amazon. This is a study from Canada, our neighbors, and it's called the COMB study, C-O-M-B, Combination of Micronutrients for Bone. Here they talked about vitamin D, vitamin K, strontium, magnesium, and DHA. Again, results were positive with regards to thickening of bone. One cool point in the study is they talk about the type of exercise for increasing bone thickness, and it's skipping rope and jumping jacks. As I mentioned in the beginning of the video, you might have to get to stairs or at least a little bit more than just flat running or walking, and skipping a rope and jumping jacks is easy. Also, if you noticed in the video earlier, I was carrying a backpack at about 16 to 20 pounds. So I really encourage my patients who are just doing walking or hiking in the neighborhood to put on some weight. Whether you put a 16 to 20 pound backpack on or you get a weight vest, it'll give you a little bit more work or impact. The sense of impact that's being sent up every time you take a step on the concrete, when you have extra weight, it's a stronger sense. And I'll have to mention this too, if you guys are really into severe osteoporosis and you begin an exercise program, you really have to get somebody to design it for you, because if you're severe and you start to exercise, you can actually break bone. Now, don't use that as an excuse not to do any form of exercise. Just get yourself a coach to design something for you. This is a study that talked about strontium citrate. And the study, they did about 650 milligrams a day. They didn't say whether it was divided or not, and it showed a positive outcome. Finally, a study on boron, which also helped reverse osteopenia, osteoporosis at 3 milligrams per day. Theoretically, it helped to increase the way vitamin D was utilized in the bone. And for those of you who don't want to gravitate towards resistance exercise because it's just too intimidating or nobody ever taught you, this was a good study that talked about the type of exercise that would best benefit osteoporosis or osteopenia. There was mention of whole body vibration plates, and there's one place that's owned in Schaumburg by a patient of mine, and the treatment is 4 to 30 minutes, several times a week for up to 22 months. So for those of you who know how I hate treadmills, I don't know that you would be able to manifest 2 years of vibration plate practice. But for the high-risk people who shouldn't be exercising, I think vibration plate is easy entry level. You just have to pay for the subscription to do that over 2 years. For those of you who have adapted walking or hiking as your exercise of choice, I think that's fair. It's entry level, but you really have to progress forward. And to wait until the 2-year mark to figure if your efforts were good enough or not is a little bit lacking. So I would say use the data that points to multi-component exercise training to increase the spine thickness. And that means some form of weight bearing, some form of cardio, and some form of resistance exercise. And the researchers found that 30 to 60 minutes a few times a week for 10 months increased bone strength. I mean, honestly, what do you have to lose? If you want to avoid the medicines that are coming your way for osteoporosis or osteopenia, then I would try to invest. And something to note too is osteoporosis increases your chances for fracture with innocent activities. A little trip, sitting down, sneezing. If you're severe, you'll break. There is a high chance of breaking even if you're osteopenic. It already increases your chances for a fracture, whether it's hip, lumbar spine, or anywhere else. Don't wait until you're told you're osteopenic or osteoporotic. In fact, a lot of the activities and nutrition planning and exercise that I suggest will actually help for other disease processes as well. So let's get into some basic exercises. This is a weight vest. If you're just going to use walking, use the walking sticks that I suggested in my last video, in addition to giving yourself some resistance. Jump roping also causes impact from ground to feet to knees, hips, thighs, lumbar spine. So try to do this. You can even go slow, at least 5 to 10 minutes a day. Or you can change it up with jumping jacks, which are old school calisthenics. Kind of boring, well, really old school, but it does increase the impact that goes up into the spine. Every once in a while you can do a happiness jump, which looks kind of funny, but it does increase your energy. Maybe you can disguise it every time you see a relative. Hey, how you doing? What have you been up to? And finally, box jumps. So if you happen to have a box, this is a Rogue. Or if you have steps that are sturdy and you won't trip, I think it's important to use that kind of activity to motivate explosive power coming off the ground. So the idea is just to get over the box, come back down, get over the box, come back down. And doing this increases your explosive power, gets you a little bit of a workout, but it causes impact. Finally, which is counterintuitive, the activity that some people will choose of Tai Chi, where you use movement and slow and smooth, can also increase the chances of thick bone with practice. The only problem is you have to find a Tai Chi Sifu or a master to teach you. There are some options for watching Tai Chi classes online, but it's never going to be the same. Hopefully this gives you a couple of ideas. If you have any questions, put them down below. Give me a thumbs up if this helped, or share this with other people who are on the fence about taking their medicines or they're having side effects from the medicines. Don't forget to subscribe, stay healthy, and I'll see you at the next video.